and in today I'm going to talk about something which is a bit unusual for me. It's not the sort of thing I normally do, but this has been something which has been a long time planned, that of Idi Amin. Idi Amin is somebody I think is known to everybody of my age from the stories they saw in the press. Sorry, I didn't turn the didn't turn the thing off. There we go. And sorry, I've got a live thing from on my own computer, so I can see and the questions when they come up. Idi Amin is somebody who was like a buffoonish type character, somebody who did he was a comedian. He gave us all a laugh, and it's this contrast with this incredibly brutal person with the comedy that was associated with him, and added to that there is the historiography of the whole situation with Idi Amin. Idi Amin noted as being one of 20th century's worst despots, but at the same time his successor was possibly even worse than he was, and his successor, I am going to put it to you, somebody who was in power for roughly the same, longer than he was, is somebody who is almost unknown. And so therefore it's these things which are actually come together to make this character. But one thing above all that I do want to stress is what actually created Idi Amin. And in my opinion, that is the British imperialism, because it is very easy for someone like Trump to make refer to African countries as, well, I'm not going to say the words that he used because I'm trying to be a bit more elegant in my speech, but to use derogatory terms for these countries. But it was these very same countries that were messed up by Europeans who went there, who destroyed the infrastructure that existed, destroyed the societies that existed there, placed their own borders absolutely arbitrarily there. And then when they realized in the 1950s and 60s that these places cost too much to run, they all cleared off and left a mess. The mess was the creation of the Europeans. And Idi Amin is a direct consequence of that, in my opinion. If we go back to the 19th century, there was the Congress of Berlin in 1878, and there the European powers decided to divide Africa up according to their own requirements. You got these straight lines, which we now know Trump doesn't like, for example, on the map, and these are countries which are made with no ethnic or other considerations taken into account. And so, for example, here I'm in the United Kingdom right now, so most people here are Anglo-Saxon, and and they speak English. If we go south, we come to France, where most people are French, and if we go east, most people are people in Germany are German, and people in Holland are Dutch, and people in Belgium and Switzerland, nobody knows what they are. So the we have this, which was created over hundreds of years, but in Africa there's a completely different situation which exists, and that is because of the Europeans, which messed everything up. Now, Idi Amin is somebody who became, as his rule continued, he became increasingly erratic, unpredictable, particularly after the United Kingdom broke off diplomatic relations with Uganda in 1977. So, and in these, what he did as a result, he awarded himself a CBE, which was the conqueror of the British Empire. He awarded himself the VC, the Victorious Cross. He declared himself the King of Scotland, and I can remember, I think it was in the Daily Mirror, the headline, "Call me the King of the Scots," or something like that. And I can remember discussing this. I used to be a member, then I was a member of a stamp club. There's only a couple of us were schoolboys, everybody else was sort of the age I am now. And discussing that. I can remember at the time he was killing thousands of people in Uganda. You could get a T-shirt that said "Amin the mood," and I am in the mood. And these things, it was treating this as as though it were a joke. But how do people in Uganda regard this today? Well, I've been following a channel called NTV Uganda on YouTube for about 7 or 8 years. The channel's now got over 1 million, something over 1.2 million subscribers. It's got about 83,000 videos, and it did a series some years ago about Idi Amin and how he is regarded in history. And you can see from comments, which are presumably coming from people in Uganda, that he's not seen in a negative light. Now, I am well aware of the fact that many people look back on a previous age because they were in good condition, they were felt healthy and fit. And in fact, it's a subject I do mean to actually just do a video on. It's when people complaining what life, how great it was in the 70s and 80s and how bad it is now. And somebody can remember the 70s and the 80s. I'm going to show you it's much better now than it was then. But so this is quite a common reaction to the getting old, that you can no longer, you have to get up 17 times a night to use the toilet and things of this nature, whereas before you didn't have to bother at all. So this is quite a normal, it's a reaction of people who are unable to accept the fact that they are getting old. Anyway, so yes, as Colin just said, Amin was reported as being a cannibal, although he himself said he didn't like the taste of human flesh as it was too salty. Can't say because I've never actually tried it. Amin was born. Now it's not, well, nobody really knows, and this is once really another fault of the administration. Of course, they weren't taking records and things like that. But it was normally assumed he was born in 1925 until actually his birth date in that, which is written on his grave, and his death certificate is 1928. So we don't actually know how old he was. During the Second World War, he claimed that he did join the army, that's for certain. He became a cook, but then he claimed that he fought in the Burma campaign, but that's not true. From being a cook, though, he was a soldier. He was, I think, was even conscripted into the army, and then he had quite, I would say, even a meteoric rise. The thing about Amin was, as you can see this by looking at him, he's incredibly powerful. He held in the from about 51 to 1960, he was the Ugandan light heavyweight boxing champion. He was a swimming champion. He was said to be really good at rugby. So he's an all-rounder. I can recall a description of him given by his commanding officer in the King's African Rifles. He was carrying a wounded comrade plus 2 Bren guns, wounded over one shoulder and 2 Bren guns over the other. And this, I mean, the Bren gun isn't. I used to carry one around as well, but it's pretty heavy. I couldn't carry that plus a person with me. But it gives an idea of his strength. He was initially used in the British Army in a revolt in Somalia, and of southern Somalia. This was the former Italian protectorate, which was captured by Britain in 1941. And the British Somalia is at the northern end. But then he was actually used in fighting the Mau Mau in Kenya, and the sort of fighting that he got involved in was particularly brutal. So he learned this brutality in the British Army. Now, whether or not they were committing crimes at the time, I can't say, but I suspect that this was the case. The fact is, at the end of the day, of course, that the Mau Mau was actually put down, and Kenya became independent by itself. Now, in the King's African Rifles, or in all colonial, or all the British colonial armies, it was not possible for locals to get into officer rank. Now, today this seems absolutely absurd. But this is part of this superiority in effect of the colonialists, and the way of treating the subjugated, occupied peoples. So they could actually use them for cannon fodder, but when it came to actually promoting them, they couldn't get promoted. Indeed, I've got a short video of the first person to fire in the British Army to fire a shot in World War One. That person was from the Gold Coast, later Ghana, and he opened fire at a German position in West Africa. In the case of Idi Amin, that he reached the highest rank possible. Now, that his rank was one called Effendi. Now, the rank of Effendi was the highest non-commissioned rank. So it's usually said that he was a sergeant major, although I think that a Effendi rank is possibly closer to that of warrant officer too. It's hard to say, because I mean, I've had a disagreement with somebody on one of the comment sections about my ranks, what the equivalent of the SS ranks were in other armies. So ranks don't always actually have equivalents, but if we say it's the highest non-commissioned rank, and that's as far as he can get. He can't get any higher. It doesn't matter what he does, he cannot get any higher. It doesn't matter how brilliant he was or could be. He can't get any higher because of the color of his skin. Absolutely absurd. And this is the colonial administration. This wasn't changed, I think, until 1960, and Amin became the second local to get promoted to be an officer. He became a lieutenant. And so 1960. Now, in Uganda became independent in October 1962, and the first president was one Milton Obote. Amin got then several promotions, because he was one of only two at the officers in the entire army, until he was actually controlling the he was head of the army, later became head of all of the armed forces, but he became involved in corruption schemes in Zaire, which was next, or the Congo, which was next door. There was no government. There was lots of smuggling. There was smuggling of things such as ivory or precious minerals such as diamonds or gold. And Amin was involved in that, as so was Milton Obote. Uganda, as I said earlier, was formerly lots of little kingdoms and the likes, and but the biggest part was a place Buganda, and there was still a king. The king decided to do something about the corruption of the Milton Obote regime, but he didn't do it quick enough. And Amin, on the orders of Milton Obote, attacked the king's palace, killed a lot of people. The king managed to get away. He fled to London and got a house somewhere in Rotherhithe, I think it was, in Kent. And he died there in 1969, aged only 44. You ever see pictures of the king? He looks really very young. And although he was in his 40s, he died very suddenly. I don't think there's anything suspicious about it. That I don't know. The thing was, though, Milton Obote and Amin were collaborating in seizing as much of Uganda's wealth as they could, probably sending the proceeds then abroad, which is one of the common things to happen in African countries, and or not just African countries, happens countries all over the world. And the reason for this is, for example, in Russia, you often say, well, they can't keep the money in Russia, they've got to send it abroad, which is in case there's a change of government. Exactly the same for countries like Uganda. If they steal anything, they can't leave it in the country, they've got to send it somewhere safe, like Switzerland, United Kingdom, United States, or some offshore place. That's the only thing, and that's why poverty actually just continues. In 1970, was it 1969, I think. I can't remember. There was an attempt to kill Milton Obote, and this was shot. The person shot at him, wounded him in the cheek. Somebody tried to throw a grenade at him. The grenade didn't go off, and but from this moment on, I think there was a separation between Milton Obote and Idi Amin, and the result was that Milton Obote decided he wanted Idi Amin to be arrested, and the Milton Obote went off to the Commonwealth Head of Governments meeting, which I think was in can't remember, wasn't the Seychelles, but anyway, went off. I wasn't Kuala Lumpur. Anyway, it was somewhere a long way away. And whilst he was there, he sent orders for Idi Amin to be arrested. However, I've got my own theory on this, which I'll come on to. Idi Amin was he got wind of this, and so then he organised a coup. I suspect that he was tipped off by the Israelis. I suspect. I mean, no proof, of course. I just suspect. I just want to make that clear. But somebody tipped him off, and so that was why. So Milton Obote was abroad, then found out he was no longer in charge in the country, and so as a result, it seemed to me from films I've seen, films I can remember from the 70s. I can't remember 71, but films I can remember being shown when Amin was overthrown, was that the people in general were very happy to get rid of this corrupt ruler. Milton Obote had taken a turn to the left. He wanted to introduce some form of socialism. The result of this has been prices had skyrocketed, and no doubt the usual problems when you try to introduce some kind of state economy is that the corruption increases enormously. There's huge amounts of people doing nothing, or pen pushers, which causes in turn all sorts of problems. So I think that people were on the whole glad to get rid of him. Amin said at the time, there are interviews, you can find them on YouTube, he said that this is we're going to have democratic elections. I'm going to stand down. I'm going to take orders from whoever the new president may be. I'm going to go back to barracks. But that didn't last very long. Within a week or so, he decided that he himself was going to be the president of Uganda. So 2nd of February 1971, Amin declared himself president of Uganda. And so he ruled then really by decree. Now, this also followed was by mass arrests. And not only that, the arrests were usually done on a racial basis, or tribal basis, perhaps a better way of putting it. Amin was from the north, and so people from his own group were promoted into power. To look at, for example, in the army, something like whereas Muslims made up 5% approximately of the population of Uganda, of the army officers they made up 75%. And so this is he's taking people he believed he could trust from his own grouping. But that's quite common. I mean, dictators do that all over the place. Milton Obote went to Tanzania, and he was offered sanctuary there by Julius Nyerere, who was the president there. And people who didn't like Amin started to join him. Nyerere effectively kept him there and allowed him to train troops there. This actually stopped after a while, and there was an agreement between Amin and Nyerere that they could not, that Nyerere wouldn't allow troops hostile to Ugandan government to have their own bases there. Now, the thing though for which Amin is possibly noted the most is in the United Kingdom, is when he turned on the Asian population. Now, there had been people from the Indian subcontinent in Africa, East Africa, since the 19th century. Many of these people were in business. The businesses were overwhelmingly owned by East Africa, by people of Asian descent. Of course, they'd been there for such a long time that they had no connection with India whatsoever. These people, about roughly half of them, I think it was, had British passports, and the Amin ordered these people to actually leave, and they gave them 90 days to do it. Now, initially, this was actually just people who had British passports. There were some, in some extreme circumstances, could actually stay. Now, the idea behind this is very similar to others when they say one group which actually owns lots of things. I mean, for example, what Nazis did to and others did to Jews. But in the case of Uganda, this was far more exaggerated. The Asians made up something like 90% of the entire tax revenue of Uganda. Now, when people have to buy things from one group and maybe it's on credit, this can make them unpopular. And seeing as it was portrayed as the Asians being wealthy and owning the resources of the country, even though they are from somewhere else or appear to be from somewhere else, nationalized, or stole, if you like to use the proper word, the property of the Asians. Many of them left. Half of them came to this country, the United Kingdom, and where they've proved to be really an excellent present for the United Kingdom. But in getting rid of these people, they took their knowledge with them. They didn't leave their knowledge there, and within a very short time, the whole distribution network collapsed. So they could steal what was actually there and left in these. Many of the people who got the property of these Asians were from northern parts of Uganda, and the result was collapse of the economy. If you get rid of 90% of your tax base, I mean, we see other things where these racist ideas actually create economic problems in themselves. And what I know about most of the Second World War, but you can see things, for example, in Lublin district in 1942, when the Jews were murdered, because the Jews were the ones that had the wheelwrights, and by family tradition lasting ages, when Polish Catholic farmers wanted to get their agricultural vehicles fixed, they could no longer do it because there was no longer do because the people who did it previously had been murdered, and as a consequence, agricultural production actually drops, and therefore there's less food to send to Germany. In the case of Uganda, you've got a very similar situation. You get rid of the people who are involved in the businesses, and as a result, everything gets worse. Same thing. I mean, communist systems are just the same. You get rid of the people who actually do the work, do the production, and know how it's done. Bang, get rid of them. Put in a bunch of idiots who don't know what they're doing, and what's the result? It's destroyed. As far as Amin is concerned, he went on to attack one group after another. His attacks on the United Kingdom, for example, sometimes they really seem very, very funny. And I often wonder if maybe he did this deliberately, because he could hold a straight face and lie blatantly. You can see some of the interviews with the Brian Barron, who was a British war correspondent. He's very well known for his interviews, not only from Uganda 70s and the interview he did with Idi Amin in Saudi Arabia in 1980, but also from Aden in 1966-67. Very well, even earlier, 64 to 67. So this is something which is he's saying with a completely straight face, but he's lying at the same time. One of the most famous incidents was the raid on Entebbe in 1977, when Amin allowed Palestinian and 2 German terrorists to hijack a plane flying from Air France, flying from Israel, had a stopover in Greece where the terrorists got on. They then directed the plane, I think, was then flying to New York. And then the terrorists directed it to Libya and then to Uganda. The Israeli commandos actually managed to rescue the people on it, quite in an absolutely brilliant operation. One of the people on that plane was British. Her name was Dora Bloch. She was born in 1902. Her father had been one of the first people to set up an agricultural settlement in what was then Ottoman Palestine. And she'd married somebody from Wales, although he was then serving in the British Army in Palestine. He was Jewish, and their family stayed there. She had 3 sons, and she spoke 6 languages. And she had a problem with ulcers. She was on the plane. She was going to her son's wedding, and she was taken to a hospital. And but she was taken to the hospital, and she was treated well in the hospital. There was the ulcer problem. But after the raid on Entebbe, we know that she was taken out of the hospital screaming and bundled into a car, and somewhere 20 miles, so 32 kilometers, I thought it was 19 miles outside of Entebbe, she was murdered. Her body was actually found in 1979 when Uganda was liberated. A final thing I'd like to actually say was about the what brought Amin down was the war, because he'd had this problem with Tanzania for some time. If you look at them, a border between Tanzania and Uganda, so it's a straight line, and there is to the south though of the border there is a river, and this river is where Amin thought that the natural border of Uganda should lie. The border had been set by the British and German colonial authorities in the 19th century. So anyways, in October of 1978, there was an invasion of Tanzania, and he captured all the land he wanted to capture, but then the Tanzanians counterattacked, and as a result, Amin was overthrown. Now, in the interview he gives with Brian Barron in 1980, he claimed he was the last person out, that this was just a temporary withdrawal, and but of course he keeps a straight face, but this was a complete rout. Many people, I think, in the Ugandan army actually went over to the other side, or they just disappeared. Amin's Gestapo, if I may use that word, the State Research Bureau, there was lots of people then. They were very well known because of the way they dressed. They had flashy clothes, big cars, sunglasses, and funny hats. And they were the people. They were this openly. That in a way that was almost as though that was their uniform. Now I tried to find out the fate of some of them. Most of them, it seems, did disappear. But there were those who were caught by Ugandan people, and they were then usually killed themselves out of revenge. Now, the place in southern Uganda, which Amin was claiming, is called Kagera. And if you look at the Kagera province of Tanzania, it's pretty large, but isn't the whole thing. Amin wasn't claiming all of this; he was just claiming the bit north of the Kagera River. But I think he was mentally unstable, and he just kept wanting more and more. He didn't have any clear policies or ideas. One thing he always claimed is trying to raise the standard of living of the poor Ugandans. That isn't it. But as a person who actually challenged the whites, and particularly the former colonialists, then I think that can account for his popularity, or at least part of his popularity, in my opinion. He died totally unpunished for any crimes, 2003. He was living in Saudi Arabia, I think it was around 1989. He flew off to Zaire, and because he wanted to take, there were Ugandan troops, Ugandan rebels there, And the thing was, the Zairian government recognized him. He was arrested. Then there was this period when he was trying to deport him to Senegal. Then I think was it Senegal or was it Chad? I can't remember. They tried to deport him to another country. Then I think he ended up in Morocco. And then he gets sent back to Zaire. In the end, the Saudi Arabians took him back, but told him that's it. He can give no more interviews, and he can no more leaving the country without their permission. And he died in 2003. Anyway, right. Sorry, I'll move my camera over and I shall have a look now at some of your questions. Sorry, I would say that very quickly because there's lots of things I could have gone into. For example, people like Bob Astles and Moore and Dora Bloch, and how the Israelis actually brought him to power in the first place. So anyway, so now coming to the questions. Hello, Mike, Craig, right. So Colin mentions his cannibalism film, actually, the Kenyan film from 1982. I can't remember what it was called now. Probably Idi Amin. The true story. He said it was somebody opened the fridge and there were dead the bodies or the heads of his enemies were in the fridge. Don't know if that's true or not. Mike says this as an analogy, and this now is Mike referring to how popular Idi Amin may be in Uganda today. Look at how many Russian people, including Putin, look favorably on Stalin. For yeah, I mean, it's really hard to believe that people can actually do this unless, I mean, okay, I appreciate that if you're a genocidal communist, then you might look on Stalin in favorably, but how anybody who isn't genocidal can do it. Not only that, with Idi Amin's regime, as with Stalin's, anybody could become a victim, and this is one of the differences indeed between Hitler. Because with Hitler, if you met the racial criteria, if you kept your mouth shut, you might actually survive. You had a chance. But with either Stalin or Idi Amin, that wasn't the case. Anybody could actually could get it. Yes, Colin mentions Private Eye did a very funny spoof column supposedly written by Amin. Yes, I vaguely remember that one. And his doctor was Scottish. Yes, he was surrounded by lots of people who, surprisingly enough, you might ask why. And one of the characters he used to hang out with was a person called Bob Astles. And he had been part of the British Indian. He was born in 1922 in Kent, Ashford, Kent. He was in the British Indian Army. He ended up in Uganda. He was then advising the Obote regime after the coup. Astles was found himself in prison. He was tortured, it would seem, in prison, and he was under suspicion because he'd been close to Obote. This is the way Idi Amin worked. Some people, for example, to use the Stalinist idea, there's a Russian general historian wrote on Stalin, I've forgotten his name now, Volkokonov. I've forgotten his name, but he was a hardcore Stalinist himself, even despite the fact that his father had been murdered by Stalin and his mother had spent many years in the Gulag. And but I don't know why I said that now. Anyway, so I've lost my train of thought. Bob Astles was taken out of prison and he was put in charge of I forgot what it was now. He had a major role within the country, and he later said after he was arrested in 1979, he said he was trying to help Ugandans, and he was trying to. He realized that Idi Amin was mad, but he's thought if he were there, he could actually control this somehow. There's another case also with a British person, Dennis Hill, Hills, I can't remember, who wrote a book referring to Amin, I think the words was a village tyrant. He was sentenced to death, and Amin said that if the then Foreign Secretary, James Callaghan, didn't come and apologise within 10 days, then he would be executed by firing squad. So, as it happened, James Callaghan did turn up in Uganda, possibly even putting his own life at the risk, and he got Hills out. So the thing with Amin is it's somebody who is absolutely unpredictable. This fact that he was supported by the Israelis, who he then turned against them. The reason Israel supported Amin was probably because of they wanted to destabilize the regime in Sudan, and Milton Obote showed a willingness to cooperate with the regime in Sudan, and because the regime in Sudan had been against Israel during the '67 war, and therefore, if he could maintain this tension, the Israelis could maintain this tension in Sudan, that made them a safer country as far as Israel was concerned. On the subject of Sudan as well, some 50% of the Ugandan army as such came from Sudan, and only about 25% of the rank and file were Ugandans. So Amin was using, above all, mercenaries. Where he got the finance from, because by 1979 the country had been absolutely plundered by him. Okay, right, good. So I've been thinking about this for some time. I had wanted to get that part off my chest because of in November 2021 I did a video on the Barbados, and how Barbados, I could understand why it wanted to break all links with the British Commonwealth after the way it had been treated, and the dreadful poverty and the slave system that existed there, which was and the people who got wealthy because of the use of slaves, and don't share and don't do any or don't do enough or whatever for the descendants of their victims, of their families' victims. It was something along these lines. I think that the problem, you've got to recognize that the British colonialism was negative for most people, and it's not that, oh, we hold the greatest empire ever. Gary says left wing now. No, I don't think so. I am right wing. I believe in free enterprise. I believe in the capitalist system. I'm totally opposed to, as it must be obvious, state-owned systems, because they just don't work. They just lead to corruption. And it's got to be, people have to be judged on their merits and not who they were. I don't think that's a left-wing ideology. Maybe if it is, then I am left-wing, but I don't think it is. I think the belief in the free market system is a more liberal ideology. Okay, thank you. All right, tomorrow I shall do something else. I might answer some of the questions that we got there after the I did a video from Tower Bridge last week on Trump's warmongering. 15 people actually unsubscribed as a result of this video, so it shows it must have had something good about it. And hello, Mohammed. And so therefore, I might go through that. It's quite clear though that people who make these comments just didn't listen, or maybe this might be the point. I failed to make my point at all. Anyway, thanks so much for listening, and I've got a lot of notes actually on the kidnapping of Dora Block and what happened. I might actually make a video of that. I've also got quite a few notes on the Foreign Office files, which came to light in 2003, on how the coup of 1971, which brought Idi Amin to power. I might do a video on that as well, but I'm not certain yet. It's a bit outside my normal thing. But anyway, we'll see. Okay. Yeah, Colin writes, what about Her Majesty's government not paying off the loans for freeing the slaves? That was not settled until 2015. Yeah, I can explain this one. When the British government decided it was going to abolish slavery, there was lots of people who had slaves as their possessions. And the policy, therefore, the British government decided it had to compensate these people. So these people had to be compensated, but from government funds, for the value of their property. It was a bit like when things are nationalized, sometimes they give some compensation. So if you own a chemical company and it gets nationalized, you can expect some compensation for the property which is taken from you. And in this case, the property of the slaves, the value of the slaves was paid to the slave owners. The problem I think with this now, because we're in a different generation. Obviously, the loan had to be paid back, but it was anyway. All I can do is explain it where it comes from. I won't moralize on it now. My problems with the former slave owners whose money comes from the abuse of people who and then that. The position that they have today. It's a bit like the proceeds of crime, and just people have said to me, well, it wasn't crime because it wasn't illegal at the time. And I suppose, okay, I suppose technically that is correct. It wasn't illegal at the time, so therefore it wasn't criminal, even though they should have, I think, should have known better. Colin asks, is the UK a force for good? Well, I would say it wasn't in the past. I'd like to think it is today. Okay, thanks for watching. All the best from me, and bye for now.